Modena, 1961. The letter sat on Enzo Ferrari's desk for 3 days. He touched it once to move it to the left corner, away from the morning light. He never opened it. His chief mechanic noticed it first. Giorgio had worked beside Ferrari for 11 years. He knew the rhythm of the office. Mail arrived at 9. Ferrari read it by 9:30. Responses were dictated before lunch, but this envelope was different. It had no return address, just a postmark from Milan. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, someone who had taken time to write neatly. Ferrari saw it the moment it arrived. Giorgio watched him pick it up, turn it over once, and set it down. The next morning, it was still there. By the third day, Giorgio understood. This was not a letter Ferrari was delaying. This was a letter Ferrari had already answered by choosing not to open it. The year was difficult. Phil Hill had just won the German Grand Prix, but the victory felt hollow. Ferrari's relationship with his drivers had never been warm. Professional, yes. Respectful, often, but never warm. He built cars. They drove them. The distinction mattered to him. 2 months earlier, he had fired a driver without explanation. The man learned about it from a journalist. When he called the factory, Ferrari refused to come to the phone. That was how things worked. Clean separations, no long goodbyes. But the letter suggested someone wanted a different kind of ending. The handwriting belonged to Carlo Bergamini. Ferrari knew this without opening it. He recognized the slope of the letters, the way the ink pressed heavy on downstrokes. Bergamini had driven for Ferrari in 1958. 3 seasons, 12 races, no wins, but consistent podium finishes. Reliable, never complained about the car, even when it failed him. Ferrari had let him go in December of that year. No warning, no meeting, just a contract that didn't arrive for renewal. Bergamini had written once, asking for an explanation. Ferrari never replied. Now, 3 years later, the envelope. Giorgio remembered Bergamini. Quiet man, always arrived early to the garage, studied the mechanic's work, asked questions about weight distribution, brake temperatures, treated the car like it mattered beyond the race. The mechanics liked him. That was unusual. Most drivers kept distance from the workshop. Bergamini would sit on a workbench during lunch, eating bread and cheese, asking about their families. When he was let go, the workshop went silent for a week. Ferrari never acknowledged it. Visual returned to office, envelope still untouched on desk. On the 4th morning, Giorgio walked into the office to find Ferrari standing at the window. The envelope was in his hand. He wasn't reading it, just holding it, looking at the handwriting. He drove well, Ferrari said. Giorgio didn't respond. Wasn't a question. Better than some who stayed. Ferrari set the envelope back on the desk, sat down, began reading the morning's technical reports. The subject was closed, but the letter remained. 1 week became 2. The envelope moved across the desk as paperwork accumulated, sometimes buried under invoices, sometimes visible again, but never thrown away. Ferrari's secretary asked once if she should file it. "Leave it," he said. She never asked again. What the letter said, no one knew. Perhaps Bergamini wanted closure, an explanation for why 3 years of loyalty ended in silence. Perhaps he wanted to apologize. Drivers sometimes did. Months later, wondering if they had failed in some way, Ferrari never articulated. Perhaps he wanted to forgive. That was harder to imagine, but possible. Some men found peace in letting go. Ferrari never speculated aloud. But he kept the letter. The decision came quietly. 1 month after the letter arrived, Ferrari opened his desk drawer. The deep one on the right, where he kept contracts from the early years. Agreements signed with drivers long gone. Some dead. Some simply disappeared from racing. He placed the envelope inside, underneath a 1949 contract, beneath names he hadn't spoken in a decade. Then he locked the drawer. For visual. Close-up of drawer closing, key turning, sound of lock clicking. Giorgio saw him do this. Didn't comment, but he understood. This wasn't indifference. If Ferrari didn't care, he would have thrown the letter away. This was something else. A permanent deferral. An answer that refused to be an answer. The letter would never be opened, but it would never be destroyed. Bergamini stopped racing in 1962. Not because of injury, not because he lost his skill. He simply stopped seeking drives. A journalist asked him about it years later, in 1967. They were at a cafe in Milan. Bergamini was working as a driving instructor by then, teaching wealthy men how to handle sports cars on closed circuits. "Why did you quit?" the journalist asked. Bergamini stirred his coffee. Took a long time to answer. "I had a question," he finally said. "I never got an answer. After a while, I realized that was the answer." The journalist pressed. "What was the question?" Bergamini smiled. Not a happy smile, a settled one. "It doesn't matter now." He never explained what he meant. Ferrari never mentioned the letter, but people noticed changes. Small ones. The kind you only see if you've worked beside someone for years. When he let drivers go after 1961, he started doing it in person. Brief meetings. Still cold. Still final. But face to face. He didn't offer explanations. That would have been too much. But he offered presence. One driver, dismissed in 1964, said later, "He looked at me for a long time before he said it, like he was making sure I heard it from him, not someone else." It wasn't kindness exactly, but it was different than before. Giorgio noticed something else. The drawer stayed locked. But sometimes, late at night when the factory was empty, Ferrari would sit at his desk and just hold the key. He wouldn't open the drawer, wouldn't take the letter out, just hold the key, turn it over in his fingers, then put it back in his pocket. Visual close-up of key in Ferrari's palm, worn from handling. In 1969, a young driver asked Ferrari how to handle failure. They were standing in the garage. The kid had crashed during practice, not badly, but enough to damage the car. He was expecting to be dismissed. Ferrari looked at him for a long time. "You handle it," he said finally, "by deciding what you owe it." The driver didn't understand. Ferrari walked away. The kid kept his seat. Bergamini died in 1988. Quiet death in a Milan hospital. His family found letters in his apartment. Dozens of them. Letters to friends, to his children, to his late wife. No one mentioned a letter to Ferrari. If he'd sent others, they were never found. Or perhaps that one letter had been enough. Perhaps he'd said what he needed to say, and the lack of response had been its own kind of reply. Ferrari died in 1988 as well, August 14th. The desk was cleared. The factory archived his personal effects. The drawer was opened. Inside they found contracts, photographs, a few personal letters from the 1940s, and one envelope, sealed. Postmarked Milan, 1961. No one opened it. It wasn't theirs to open. It was filed with the estate, labeled simply unopened correspondence. There are some silences that carry more weight than words. Ferrari built an empire on certainty. Every car was a statement, every decision, final. He didn't second guess, didn't apologize, didn't explain. But he kept the letter for 27 years, through victories and disasters, through deaths and triumphs. The envelope stayed in that drawer, never opened, never destroyed. What Bergamini wrote, no one will ever know. Perhaps it was an accusation, perhaps forgiveness, perhaps just a question that deserved an answer. Ferrari chose not to find out, but he chose to remember that the question existed. We think of powerful men as those who act decisively, who confront, who resolve. But Ferrari's power in this moment was in restraint. He could have opened it and responded. He could have thrown it away and forgotten. Instead, he created a third option, a locked drawer, a permanent suspension. The letter existed, he acknowledged it, but he would not let it change what had already been decided. Some people would call this cruelty, others, self-protection. Perhaps it was both, or perhaps it was the only honest response Ferrari knew how to give. He couldn't give Bergamini what he wanted, but he wouldn't pretend the wanting didn't matter. The cars grew faster, the victories more frequent. But those who worked closest to Ferrari said he changed after 1961. Not softer, never that, but more aware that silence carries a cost, that choosing not to answer is still a choice, that some envelopes once received can never truly be set aside. The letter stayed sealed, but it was never forgotten.